اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما. Last time we spoke about why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabb and what are some of the things that He has provided us to sustain in this life. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about one more thing in Surah Bani Israel. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. The things that you don't know, don't talk about them in a way that will going to cause you to go away from the right path. For example, if we look at some of the theories revolving around as like Dervadian theory or other kind of theories, who did not fully understood the creation of the human being process, so they actually made an assumption that yes, we might have been derived from apes. And everything else that has been coming to life might have been through a process of amoeba, through a mutation process. So Quran talks about the process of evolution of different beings, also of the planet Earth, and also of the universe. It might have been missing in some of the other books that they have been coming from, but Quran clears up all of these things and says, well, you would be wrong to discuss these things from your own knowledge. Because remember, إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Your hearing, your seeing, and your heart, all three of these components by which you take actions, you're responsible and you're answerable for these. So that's what Quran lays as foundation. Then one more thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in another surah. أَفَرَأَيْتُم مَا تُمْنُونَ. Have you not, no, whenever the Quran says, have you not seen, it doesn't mean have you not seen, it means have you not pondered, have you not researched over, have you not think about it. That the sperm that you generate, أَأَنْتُمْ تَخْلُقُونَهُ. Did you create that sperm? أَمْ نَحْنُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Or we created that sperm. Something as simple, as small as a sperm, when it gets injected, it comes in millions. Millions of them come out. And they're so microscopic. Do you create it or do we create it? نَحْنُ قَدَّرْنَا بَيْنَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمَسْبُقِينَ. We have decreed death among you and we are not to be outdone. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the process of life after the creation of Adam. But now we're going to talk about the process of life as Adam was getting created. Here, there are two things I want you to understand, and Quran talks about both of them very clearly, but a lot of people don't understand the difference. There are two worlds. One is called Alamul Amr, and one is called Alamul Khalq. Alamul Amr means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, happen, and it will happen. So it is being controlled by a command. So Alamul Amr means command. Alamul Khalq means a world of creations. When a world of creation takes place, it could happen in steps and stages. It may not happen right away at the moment. So there are two different worlds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. There are certain things that I create on the spur, and there are certain things that I create through a process. For example, in Iceland, in the last century, in the past century, something happened drastic. As a result, an island emerged. When the island emerged, of course it came from the sea, but within a year's process, you could not tell that this is an emerged island because anything and everything that exists and happens on a regular land, you can find it over there. Like all the bugs and all the grass and all the... anything and everything that you can think would be in any other place in Iceland, you'll be able to find it in that. So the process of evolution can happen in stages. Sometimes it is very quick. Sometimes it slows down. So the theory that says evolution only happens in hundreds and thousands of years, then it could not have been possible that that island would have generated life after coming out of a sea within a year's time span, just by seeing all four seasons. So evolution can happen, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says not always is the case. So when we talk about the khalq, I'm going to give you an English definition of it. Khalq means is to create a new object from existing components. So something has to exist for these things to be produced. So when Adam was created, what was Adam created from? Sand. So sand existed for Adam to be created. But the creation of sand is a totally different process. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Adam was created, so uses the word khalq. On the other hand, there is another word called amr. Amr is the process which happens before the process of khalq. So khalq is the process which can only happen if something was created prior to it through the process of amr or through the process of evolution itself. So something has to exist for something to be created. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-A'raf, أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ, that both of these things, the things happening through the process of khalq and things happening through the process of amr, both of these things belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who's capable of doing both of these things. Now there is an ayah in Surah Yasin. إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. Now notice the word in this ayah is the word amr. إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ. Whenever he decides to do anything, he tells that thing, happen, and that thing happens. إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ. What is his command? إِذَا أَرَادَ. When he decides to do something, شَيْئًا, anything, أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. Now here comes a very important question. Notice the wordings of this ayah again. When he decides to do anything, he tells that thing to happen, so it happens. That means the thing has to exist to be told. Because the word in the Quran is lahu, which is a pronoun talking about when he decides to do something, he tells that something to happen. So this is where ulama goes into the detail and said, well, the thing never existed, so what does it mean that he is talking to that thing? So we're going to explain this a little bit in just a little while. Just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. So, when we talk about the process of existence, that is a little bit different from the process of the thing being in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has thing in His knowledge. He says, I will create this. So when He says, now you get created, He's transferring that object from His knowledge to an existence. So from a non-object world, He's promoting it to an object world. That's why He says, lahu, when I tell that thing. What thing? The thing that was in my knowledge. Now you must reveal yourself. So that thing reveals itself. So إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. Happen, so it happens. So this is alam al-amr. And through the process, things then go through. So there are two concepts I want to talk about here. One is called objectivity, and one is called persistence. Objectivity and persistence. We'll talk about those two things. But we need to first understand, when things are in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is the scientific name for that? The scientific name for that is inorganic world. Inorganic world. Why? Because things have not yet taken the form of an organism. We do not have any molecules. We do not have anything that will going to be in the form of viewability. So it's an inorganic world. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take things through the process of organism into an organic world. Now, once the object exists in an organic world, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that object a conscience. This is where the animal world is born. We're all part of this animal world. We are being social animal, not the Dravidian animal, being the social animal. We have the characteristics of consciousness. So does a plant. So does an animal. So does a fish. They all have some form of conscience. They do fear, they are happy, they're sad. So they do have feelings. So just exactly like us. So the consciousness was injected in everything that exists on the planet Earth. So this is where we move from an inorganic state through an organic state, and through the consciousness we go into the animal world. Now, a hadith that is reported by several different books of hadith, like in Muwahibul Ladunya it is reported by Imam Zurqani, it is reported in Sirat al-Halabiyah, that Jabir bin Abdullah, one of the companions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, a young man, after his dad died away in one of the battles, he always used to be with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in almost anywhere he would go outside of the Medina. So he said, once I asked him that, Ya Rasulullah, can you please tell me what was the first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created? So he constantly used the word khalq. What was the first thing that he created? So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, Ya Jabir, Inna Allah ta'ala khalaqa qabla al-ashya'i nura nabiyyika min nurihi. That before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created anything, He created the light of your Prophet, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This light existed as a nur, and nothing else existed. There were no angels, no universe, no planet, no sun, no moon, no pen, no book, nothing, no arsh, no kursi, nothing. In another hadith it says that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that this nur, reported by Imam Abdul Razak and Musannaf ibn Abdul Razak, he said that this nur would travel, because there was no universe, it was just an empty space, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would wish, this nur would travel. Then there came a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took this light and divided this light into 4 parts. Extracted something out of this light and divided it into 4 parts. From the first part, He created the pen. From the second part, He created the lawh. From the third part, He created the arsh. Then He took the 4th part and further divided it into 4 parts. So like that, all the creations were created, and the core was the light of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was created. But that light was created, he was not yet given the form of a human being. That is why in another hadith, when it was asked of him, who was the first prophet? He said Adam. Because Adam was the first one, in the human form, was the first prophet. And then he was asked in another hadith, when were you prophet? He said, I was prophet way before Adam. Means not in the human form, but in a different world. So that is why when you look at all these different hadiths, they have their own context. For example, if I say that Mr. X came first in the class, that means he only came first in that class. That doesn't mean he topped the world. So things are contextual, that when pen is the first thing got created, that means after the division, pen was the first thing that got created. But Adam was the first being created means among the human beings, he was the first one being created. So everything has a context. So when we look at something, we have to look at it in the wider perspective. So when we talk about the human creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes human creation in 7 stages in the Quran. That's why I use 7 different terminologies. And throughout the process, ulama uses the word that in each step, there was a chemical change and a physical change and a biological change. But chemical change was extremely evident because when all of these things were coming together, they were changing forms. They were not in their original form anymore. So one form was taken, was transformed to the second form. So when second form was established, first form is gone. Okay, in certain forms, 2 forms are being put together to create a third form. So when the third form gets created, the first 2 are gone. So in the first thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, one of the main components from where Adam was created was turab, sand, which is an inorganic matter. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, I'm going to also give you the ayahs from the Quran, so I'm just giving you the words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Adam was created from water. That was another component. Then says, Adam was created from teen, which is clay. Then says in another place, Adam was created from teenul ladhib, the sticky clay that you can probably like a Play-Doh. Then say, salsalim min hama'im masnoon, an old clay which is chemically altered. And then says, salsalin kal fakhar, a dried up clay which has now been purified so it can be used to create a human. So that was the 7th and the final form, salsalim min teen. That now from that purified form, something was extracted and further purified to create Adam. These are the 7 stages. That's why in Quran, when you look at these 7 words, they're not to confuse us that whether he was created from one thing or the other. These are 7 different processes through which Adam alayhi salam went. So sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the core. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a refined process. Sometimes talks about the intermediate process. So let's look at turab, the inorganic matter, the sand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ. He created you all from sand. That was your original form. Now notice the word khalaq. As I told you earlier on, khalaq always says a process. Amr always says things will happen right away. So khalaq, whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use the word khalaq in the Quran, it means there has to be a process. It will have stages. It will not going to happen overnight. So هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ. He created you from sand. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when talks about ma, the water, وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ بَشَرًا. He's the one who created man from water. Now comes the question, well, we're not created 100% from water. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ مِنَ الْمَاءِ. From water, the human beings. And then he says in another place, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. Everything that exists as a living being in this universe has some portion of water in its creation. So that is why there are certain characteristics that we all share. Because there was certain thing that was used in our creation that is all common across the board. So when you put certain things together, if they have certain chemicals being used, they do have some properties to some extent of those chemical bondings. So there was some water that was used. So where was this water used, Ya Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He then explains in the third process, he says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن طِينٍ. He created you from clay. Surah Al-An'am. So how is the clay formed? You take a sand and you mix it with water. So now we have 2 original entities which also came through some form of creation, and now they are being mixed together. So now he says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن طِينٍ. So teen is another form of turab, which is a pure sand. Okay. Now, in different books of dictionary, when Arab ulama talk about the word teen, they literally tell you that in Arabic language, teen is usually used when you mix water and sand together. In a portion, like you probably might have seen a dough, when you make a dough for making bread. So you don't add too much water. If you add too much water, you'll have a little bit of loose dough. So enough water with enough quantity of sand to make a clay. So that's what the word teen applies. So now the clay is formed. Okay. Now comes the 4th step, which is teenil ladhib. This is sticky clay that can be taken to mold shapes. So it was a clay, now it is in the form of stickiness. So now let's look at the word teenil ladhib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Safat, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُمْ مِنْ teenil ladhib. Indeed, we created them from sticky clay. Okay. And then, let's look at the 5th form. It says, صَلْصَالٍ مِّنْ حَمَإٍ مَسْنُونٍ. Now there are many words here. So that's why we need to understand all the words. Salsal is a different word. Hama is a different word. Masnoon is a different word. And Hama and Salsal is connected with the preposition min. So we're going to look at each one of the words. So, in Surah Al-Hijr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ قَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانِ. We have created indeed the human being min salsalin min hama'im masnoon. We have created this human being from salsal. Now what does salsal means? That let's say if I take a clay, sticky clay, and I put it out in the sun. What am I doing to this clay? I am letting this clay go through a process of drying up. How does it dry? Heat comes in and it dries it. So when it gets dried, if it is really, really sticky, because remember it's a sticky one. If it's not sticky, what's going to happen? It will fall out. Like if you leave a Play-Doh out there in the sun, it starts falling out. But in this case, it's a very sticky one. So it'll stick together when it dries out. So it is out there to be dried. That's salsal. So once it dries, what happens? If you hit it, like there's hollow, right? This is hollow, so if I stick, it makes sound. If it's hard, depending on how hard it is, if there is a stud or not, it'll going to make different kind of a sound. So salsal is, it's a dried out hollow thing, which if you hit, it will going to make sound. So what is hama? Hama means it was heated. So in the Quran, the word hama has been used so many times to talk about heat. I'm going to give you some examples here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ghashiyah, Tasla naran hamiyah. They were going to see big flames of fire. Huge flames of fire. Yawma yuhma alayha fi nari jahannam. This will going to be a day when things will going to be put in the hellfire and they will going to receive the heat. So the heating process has been talked about, after which this clay got the form that it got. Okay, then in Surah Al-Hijr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Salsalim min hama'im masnoon. That when a time went on, so there are many factors here. Time has to pass, enough heat has to be provided, so that it all dries out. Now comes another component, masnoon. Hama'im masnoon. Salsalim min hama'im masnoon. In this whole process, because of the chemical changes taking place, there comes a time, if you put a lot of water and sand together, it creates a mud. And the mud in the form of clay produces a lot of smell. So in this process, the smelling has to go away. So there are going to be chemical changes in the process where the smell has to go away. So now it takes the next form, salsalin kal fakhar, where it is dried up and now it is getting purified. So the word fakhar in Arabic language is used. It has a root of fakhr. Fakhr means feeling proud of oneself. So if something is very beautiful, they use the word fakhr for the word of a beautiful cloth or a beautiful animal. So the word fakhr is there in the core, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rahman, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ. That means it was hollow, that you could actually hit on it, it'll produce a noise, and it was something that was purified. Now, as all the smell has gone away. All the smell has gone away. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created humans from a different core than jinns. In Surah Al-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right after this ayah, وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ مِّن نَارٍ. And we created the jinns from what? Smokeless fire. So they have been created from fire. We have been created from sand. We do have a component of fire in us. How? Because remember, the clay was heated. The clay was heated. Those chemical compounds give us emotions. As a human being, you have anger, you have rage, you envy, you're jealous. So all of those little components of heat that we constitute make part of this chemical bonding of the human process. And then after the process of hama'im masnoon, salsalin kal fakhar, the creation of the jinn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the seventh form, salalatim min teen. Then we took an extract out of this purified clay. وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ. Now we have created the insan from what? مِن سُلَالَةٍ مِّن طِينٍ. From the extract of this purified clay, then we started creating the Adam alayhi salam. So we took the sand, mixed it with water, made it clay, let it be a sticky clay, let it be dry out in heat, let it take away all the smell from it, chemically bond it together, go through a purification process. Once it is purified, then we will further filter it out and take an extract from it, and then from which we're going to create this being. Okay? So this is the process of the creation of Adam alayhi salam. So there were a lot of chemical components. Now let's look at the process of evolution as science explains. Of course, Quran doesn't deny this process of evolution, the creation of the universe, because this is where the two components came from, the sand and the water. That gave birth to the creation of human being. So these have to exist before Adam has to exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created these components. What does science say? Science says when Big Bang happened, which is also being explained in the Quran, that everything was together and we exploded it. So when we exploded it and everything was formed in its perfection, then what happened? The earth was extremely hot. Extremely hot. So it did had these 7 components. It had water. It had ammonia. It had methane. It had carbon dioxide. It had hydrogen cyanide. And it had a hydrogen molecule, which is an H2, not yet connected with an O to form water. Okay? It had methane, which also has hydrogen in it. It had ammonia, which also has hydrogen in it. It has hydrogen cyanide, which also has hydrogen in it. The only component which was without hydrogen was carbon dioxide. When these components were created, now the chemical bonding process started. How the chemical bonding process started? Because of extreme amount of heat, what happens when you heat water? Steam is formed. And the steam starts leaving the surface of Earth. And what happens as a result? The clouds formation. When enough clouds are formed, what happens? Rain. So through this process of evolution, rain happened for years after years after years on the planet Earth to cool it down. But if these components were not there, then this cooling process would not have happened. That is why it didn't happen on Mercury, didn't happen on Venus, didn't happen on Mars, but happened on Earth. Because of the chemical entities that were placed in the creation of Earth. As a result, these things reacted. So because of the successive rain on the planet Earth, a lot of the other chemical components came into existence and the Earth's temperature went tremendously down. So as a result, we saw components like sugar being formed, glycerine, fatty acids, amino acids, and nitrogen gases were formed. Okay? The component of amino acid is extremely important. You probably might have heard about certain things which are needed, like fatty acids in your diet to make sure things are happening. But these amino acids are extremely important because through the process, they give birth to nucleic acids. Nucleic acids help the process of DNA. What is DNA? DNA has your genes, and they constantly multiply and reproduce and increase. And when they reproduce and increase and come in contact with another gene, as a communication of 2 genes, what happens? A new gene is formed with different traits, where it takes some from one and some from the other. So this whole DNA process of reproduction and mutation has its core in nucleic acid, which was created as a core of the creation. So this nucleic acid has certain components which gives birth to chromosomes, which give birth to RNA, but DNA is still the main factor which drives anything and everything that exists as an entity on this face of Earth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first created through the process of evolution the components which will going to be needed to bring things back to life. Then, this is where Quran says that when the process of Adam started, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced Adam to angels like this. فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ, when I perfect him, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, and inject a soul in him, فَقْعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. Now you got to prostrate to Adam, and you have to show your allegiance. You have to show your allegiance that you are going to be protective of this race. You are going to be the server of this race. So many things around us, angels are serving us. What are they doing on our left and right shoulder? They're serving us. What are they? Why are they here in the masjid taking notes? Who is here? Who is not here? Who is doing good deeds? Why do they have to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at their time of Asr and a new one comes in And those who came in the Asr report back at the time of Fajr, and those who reported and went on Asr come back on Fajr. They're constantly busy in that who was doing what in this world gets to be reported on daily purpose. Some of them have the responsibility of taking care of mountains. Some of the responsibility of taking care of sea. Some of the responsibility of taking care of the ecosystem. Some of them have the responsibility of helping human race. So there's so many things that they have to do to serve us. So they had to bow down to show that, yes, we truly believe that this is a superior entity to which we need to serve. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them, now notice this is the word, Inni khaliqum basharam min salsalim min hama'im masnoon. I am in the process of creation of bashar. Notice did not use the word insan here. Because there is a difference between the word bashar and jinn. In the linguistics, bashar means something that you can see, viewable. The word bashar means good news. So it is, or also means something viewable. Jinn means something hidden. So jinn means hidden, bashar means some. So this will be something that you will all be able to see. This will be a bashar. I will going to create him min salsalim min hama'im masnoon. I'll take him in the clay form and I'm going to burn it, and then I will going to produce something out of it. So since angels learn about this burning process, that this will be a clay that will be burned, right away what did they say? Oh my God, that means this entity will go on the face of earth and start killing each other. Because it has the quality of burn. So that's how they came to that conclusion, that the chemical bonding that has made this structure come to life has the capability of hurting and has the capability of rage and anger and envy and feelings. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then calmed them down and says, I know what you don't know. So stay calm. I'll prove it to you that this is not exactly what you're thinking he is. He's not all that. He can do it. But that's the whole test for him to control those qualities and follow me, and that's how I will going to basically. And notice another word here, which kills the whole Darwinian theory. The Darwin's theory. The Darwin said that okay, the mutation happens, all this process happened, okay, and then several human beings were created. Because this happened on the face of earth, the sand was being formed, so through a chemical process, amoeba was formed and the mutation happened. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, one human, it's all singular. Inni khaliqum bashar, one person I'm creating. Min salsalim min hama'in masnoon. From this process, I'm creating only one being. Throughout the Quran, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the creation of Adam, use singular form. That kills the whole theory of multiple beings being created at the same time. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say that He did not create anything on earth. Rather, He created everything on earth before Adam was created. Why? Because when Adam was introduced to angel, what was Adam asked? And what was angels asked? Angels was asked, if you really, really, truly believe that He's out there to kill each other, then tell me one thing, name all these items. You know, we don't know. We don't have the knowledge. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. We taught him the names and properties and qualities of everything. That means everything has to exist for Adam to know about it. If things did not existed, then he was not knowing about everything. So the word kulliha does not make sense. That everything does not make sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, we taught him names. Allama Adam al-asma. Then ask the angels, tell these things. He doesn't say these things. He says all things. From where we drive the conclusion that this was the last of all the creation and everything else was created so that he was given the knowledge of everything that was created and then he was created. But the way the amoeba has been described to be the formation of the human race, Quran does not agree with that amoeba as a process of evolution was used in the creation of anything, because that means that everything should be able to change forms. And you will be surprised, there's actually a fish which remains blind. It's a blind fish. It can't see. But through the process of evolution, it should have been able to see. Through the process of evolution, it should have been able to see. How about humans? Through the process of evolution, we should have been able to evolve and now have 7 fingers. And those people who are malnutrition should have only maybe 1 or 2. But that doesn't happen. And some of these evolution orientalists say that there is no purpose of appendix, so it's useless. Through the process of evolution, this extra piece was created. But the science proved that appendix does the job of the tonsils in the lower body. Whatever your tonsils does in the upper body, appendix does in the lower body. So it's not a useless component. Nothing in the human body is useless. There is a purpose of everything. So through the process of evolution, how come those brothers of mine are still monkeys? And I was so fortunate enough to be a human being. It's been happening. So they should also change form. I should see at least 1 or 2 monkeys turning into slight humans. I haven't seen any yet. And they have not been, their own people who are core atheists have stated in their books that yes, we have not yet been able to prove everything that we have been following and stating. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have created everything with perfection. And for you human beings, وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. When it comes to insan, we have created you in the best form possible. That means it was the best of all creation. When you say, this is my best piece, when do you claim that this is my best piece? When you have already created all other pieces. Then it becomes the best piece. And you have no intentions of creating any other piece that is better than this one. Then you can say, this is my best piece. So this was created towards the end when everything else was created, because everything has to be subjected to this being. That is why this being is being able. So notice, why does sun comes out? For who? Why does moon comes out? For who? Why does these stars sprinkle? Who does water serves? What about all these foods and fruits and vegetables and the shades of the tree? Who are they serving? Why does the wind blows? Why does the rain happens? Who is everybody serving? The human race. We are the one getting served through this entire process. Why planet Earth has this ozone layer? To protect us from the harmful sun rays. Why we? And if this all happened accidentally, then it's a very beautiful accident. So perfectly formed. So Quran says, yes, there are some component, but we do not believe in this process. Why? Because الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى. He's the one who created you in balance. وَالَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. And then He guided you. Accidents don't guide. Perfections guide. Process guides. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a game plan, the whole plan laid out for this whole race. Only presented a handful of things to the angels and said, I want this being to take care of the earth. But notice, He introduced Adam like that. But where did He keep Adam? For unknown time. In Jannah. How did He introduce Adam? I am creating somebody as a khalifatul ard, as a caretaker of the earth. But where did He keep him? In the Jannah. Did not even tell that part to angels. Angels don't know anything about it. Did not even question that you told us that He is to go to the planet Earth. Why is He sitting in heaven? What is He doing here? And not only that, created another being from Adam right within the heavens. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in Surah An-Nisa, the chapter for women in the Quran. الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدٍ. We created you all from one soul. One soul. What was the soul? Adam alayhi salam. Why was the Hawa not mentioned? The wife. Because وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا. Because from him the wife was created. When he woke up one morning, he saw another being sitting right next to him because he was so bored in heavens by himself. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is this person? He said, that's your partner. His name is Hawa, created from you. And now you should live together still in heaven. But now the new rulings have applied. You should not go past this particular, you should not go near this particular tree, but you can go anywhere else. That's it. Only one restriction. Only one restriction. Entire heaven is open. One restriction. And you know how Shaitan convinced Adam? Shaitan convinced Adam by exploiting his love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not convince him that you were going to now sin. He convinced him and said, Adam, would you not love if you could stay here forever? So who would not want to stay here forever? No work, nothing. Whatever I wish I get. Wherever I want to go, I go. He said, okay, then there's something very easy that you can do and you'll stay here forever. He said, what is that? Eat from that tree. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forbidding you from eating from that tree because if you eat from that tree, you will stay here forever. And He does not want you to stay here forever. He wants you to go somewhere. So if you eat from that, you can stay here. He said, oh my God. And then the husband and wife started talking to each other. Wouldn't you want to stay here forever? He said, of course. So in love of Allah, they were deceived to eat from it. And this whole process is happening. Allah did not intervene because of the free will of the human race. You have a free will, but once you exercise it, once Adam exercised the free will, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Alam anhakuma? Did I not tell you not to do that? And they're like, oh my God, all the clothes vanished from their bodies. They became naked. And then they started grabbing the leaves of the heaven to protect their bodies. And then they were asked to now leave the heavens because they've broken the law. They've broken the law. So now is the time to exit. So this is how Shaitan plays. He has a role to play in this process. He sometimes deceives us with love. Sometimes deceives us in anger. Sometimes he deceives us in pride. You know what? You're looking so good today. You know. I think you're the best looking gentleman in the community. I think girls will go crazy after you. And the person is so proud of himself, you know, that he looks at himself every time in the mirror and he's like, I am the most good looking, handsome guy. If I was in Hollywood, man, I would have made a fortune out of myself. What am I doing in Kenosha? He deceives you. And he does the same thing with girls. And then in the deceitful process, you don't realize that how far you go. And then there is no comeback because it's part of you now. At the same time, you're going to find people who are so arrogant. It doesn't matter. You move the world for them. They would not smile at you. And if there's anything that could make them smile, they would still be like, Assalamu alaikum, brother. And they first judge you. Why is he saying salam to me? Do I know him? Come on. You're at the masjid. I'm saying salam to you. Just say salam back to me. That's it. But this is part of them. So much they don't even realize. It's part of me. They're so uptight. So there are things that he plays with you. So this is where the human has to make a decision that where am I to overcome this? Am I an angry person all the time? If I'm so angry, oh my God, I must have broken so many hearts and so many feelings. Oops. Was that my sole purpose, to be angry at all the time and mad at all the time? Or am I the follower of Rahmatul lil Alameen, the Prophet of the Mercy? Who am I? What am I following? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, yes, we created you with certain components. They are part of you. However, you have to make sure that you overcome that. So there's a whole research being done on this process. Some of the books in the process of evolution, from where this information was extracted, written by different people. And this Turkish scientist, I'm forgetting his name, he talks about a lot of these processes, how through Islam, he said, he answered all these people who said, we came from apes. Some of the books written by Jeremy Rifkin, he wrote a book on alchemy. Paul Moorhead, Martin Kaplan, they wrote some books on, they proved mathematically it doesn't make sense that Darwin's theory was correct. Mathematically they proved that. Then Norman Macbeth wrote a book on Darwin, retired, and Appeal to Reason in 1971. Gish wrote a book on evolution, The Fossils Say No, in 1978. John Moore wrote a book on chromosomes. Walter J. Bach wrote a book on review of evolution. Harold Francis wrote a book on Time's Arrow in Evolution. Nilsson Herbert wrote a book from Sweden. Prayer Paul Grace, David Raub, all of these guys have written different books to prove different aspects of evolution process. So the bottom line is that we do believe that Adam was created through a process of evolution. However, that process of evolution was not the same as being claimed to be deriving from apes. Rather, it was a process of evolution in which different components were used in the creation of Adam, and those components went through a process. So, that's basically I wanted to talk about today. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue with other aspects of Surah Al-Fatiha next time. The reason I wanted to talk about this process today, because when we talk about Rabb, the caretaker of us, we need to know who we are, where we come from, and what does He talks about us in His own book, so that we understand who we are, and we can act upon that thing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in a lot of these ayahs which I've told you about, in a lot of those ayahs, as soon as He talks about us, He right away goes back to, I am the Rabb. I created you. So that's why I say, whenever you look at the Quran and its translation, just ponder over it a little bit. If you can read Arabic, well and good, that okay, why this word is translated the same as the other word when they're two different words. I mean, it doesn't make sense that why the two words being translated with the same word, that teen, people also write the same word as turab in the translation. They both write like sand. Why? There have to be different words. They have to have different meanings. So that's where you can go and understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a little bit better. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم يا غفار. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إننا كنا من الظالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So we moved to 10 o'clock today, right? That's the way. 10 o'clock, right? 10 o'clock. You are the man of the hour. Don't mind if I do.